What if I told you that this symbol is being hijacked? Right now, across the globe, there are groups posing as Freemasons, operating entirely outside the bounds of the legitimate Masonic community. They wear our aprons, they wear our regalia, they mimic our ceremonies, but worst of all, they take the money of well-intentioned men, promising them a brotherhood that they have no power to deliver. Clandestine Masonry. Let's talk about it. Welcome to the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry channel. I'm Maynard Edwards, 33rd degree. On this channel, we talk about the philosophy, the symbolism, the history, and the fun of Freemasonry. Hit those like and subscribe buttons below if you want to follow along. If you're a Mason or you'd like to be, this is a good place for you. Clandestine Masonry, it is not just a matter of internal Masonic politics or conflict, but sometimes it can seem that way. Clandestine Masonry, true clandestine Masonry, is an absolute direct threat to the reputation of our craft, and in many cases, it's fraud, perpetrated on unsuspecting men who are looking for a place to belong. In this video, we're going to define exactly what clandestine Masonry really is. We're going to hear from a brother who's been on the front lines dealing with this issue. And finally, I'm going to give you some tips on what to do when you encounter one of these counterfeit craftsmen. In the Masonic world, we throw terms around kind of loosely sometimes, and that leads to confusion. So let's sort of level set and straighten out the record on three very different categories: unrecognized, irregular, and clandestine Masonry. These are all things that are sort of outside the norms of legitimate mainstream Freemasonry. Now, before anybody comes at me in the comments, just know, like all things in Freemasonry, there are always exceptions to certain rules. So I'm going to be painting with a pretty broad brush here just to get the ideas across. Let's first talk about unrecognized Freemasonry. This means a Grand Lodge that is not recognized by your Grand Lodge. They are not in amity. In other words, they don't have a formal agreement of recognition. For whatever reason, sometimes political, sometimes administrative, these two Grand Lodges are essentially not friends right now. They can't sit in your lodge, you can't sit in their lodges. These are legitimate Masons, but for right now, they are outside of each other's circles. Now, sometimes this happens because there's conflict between two Grand Lodges. They disagree about something, they decide to withdraw recognition, and then they are unrecognized. But again, these are legitimate Masonic organizations. They just don't have that formal agreement with one another. So that is unrecognized Freemasonry. Next is irregular Freemasonry. This refers to a Masonic body that may or may not have originally held a valid charter from another Masonic organization, or may at one time been recognized by the rest of the Masonic community, but for some reason they have deviated from what we call the ancient landmarks of Freemasonry. In other words, these are the general rules that most Masonic lodges are governed by. The most common examples of this are the Grand Orients or the Masonic jurisdictions that have removed the requirement for a belief in a supreme being, or grand jurisdictions that are admitting women. And in terms of whether you can sit in those lodges or not, if your Grand Lodge is a regular Grand Lodge, an irregular Grand Lodge is not going to be someplace that you can go and visit. Which leaves us with the real problem: true clandestine Freemasonry. A clandestine lodge, now I mean a true clandestine lodge, is one that has no legitimate Masonic authority whatsoever. It possesses no charter from any regular Grand Lodge in the world. It has no connection or lineage to any original Grand Lodge anywhere in the world. These are often pop-up groups started by individuals for personal profit or ego. Sometimes they're aggravated with a legitimate Masonic organization, so they decide, I'm just going to go buy some regalia and start my own thing. A lot of times, these are used as a cover for nefarious activities, scams, and fraud, and they are quite simply bogus, as we say. These are counterfeits, preying on men who are legitimately seeking light. This is not a theoretical problem. In your town, right now, wherever you are in the Masonic world, there are clandestine lodges not far away. And there are men who were interested in Freemasonry that were duped into joining these fake organizations. And it happens every single day. A lot of times, these men are paying thousands of dollars and enduring all kinds of degrading treatment in addition to having their bank accounts drained. To help us understand the human side of this, I recently spoke with worshipful brother Brian Byrd. He's the host of the very popular Old Fashion Masonic Podcast. He's had plenty of conversations with men who were unknowingly initiated into these clandestine groups. Here's a clip from our interview and what brother Brian has learned from some of these encounters with clandestine Masons.
I'd heard the word clandestine, and just like you alluded to, like, why would anybody want to fake this? Come on in. What we've learned on our interviews, it is such a world of buying degrees, paying for 32nd or 33rd degrees, anywhere between $700 and $15,000. And what we've determined, it's, at least in the United States, it's predominantly in the African American community.
It is.
It's 97%, forget the number. Somebody's going to fact check me and say it's 95%.
Predominantly.
It's a high number, right? And it's really fascinating. And so when we've interviewed guests, they said, there are times where we had a background that we didn't think that they would accept, but these guys said that they would. Or I wanted to be in a lodge where somebody looked like me. And okay, I get that. But the interesting thing and some of the conversations that I've had with guests is, so you wanted a second chance, great. You wanted to be in a lodge where somebody looked like you, I get it. But this predatory, I feel like, in my opinion, you want to talk about attacking your own community and defrauding your own community. That's the opposite of what I think that I would want. If I'm really trying to make a change, and forget if I agree with the lineage and all that, why would I want to defraud my own community? And that's a whole nother layer of just...
Yeah, because and we should probably explain to folks who are not up on this. So what will happen very often is that these clandestine organizations will say that, the initiation fee is, thousands of dollars, and then monthly you have to pay thousands of dollars. And I like you, I kind of at first I didn't take it seriously. And then a couple of years ago, it was right before the holidays. This is pre-COVID, so it's been more than a couple of years ago. This gentleman came into the House of the Temple. We get brothers come in all the time. And if I see someone that, I'll stop and chat with them and introduce myself. Well, this gentleman is in the library, and he's talking to one of our librarians and trying to inquire about how he can join us and get away from where he is. And I start talking to him, and he's from the Washington, D.C. area and had joined a lodge, and he explained to me, and he showed me his dues card, and he said, the master says I have to pay this much more money, or I have, and I have to divorce my wife, and all these other and this man had spent several years trying to become a master mason. He'd finally earned enough money to pay to become a master mason. And it was some god awful figure, like 10 grand that he had to pay just to become a master mason. And then, but then he, they were telling him he had to leave his wife and all that because she didn't approve of the lodge. And so he wanted to join our organization. So I had to kind of very delicately explain to this brother, or this man, he wasn't a brother officially, that he was part of a clandestine group. And I mean, he was just heartbroken, and my heart just went out to him because you could tell he was a pretty good guy and just wanted to belong to a good organization and thought that that's what he was doing. And really, they were just kind of taking his money and more or less abusing him sort of mentally and emotionally. And it was really just unfortunate. And it's out there. And those are some of the guys that you're talking to.
It's amazing. So we kind of jokingly, we started to, every time somebody would come in and say, hey, I found out that I'm clandestine, I'm getting out, and which kind of helped directing. So we're like, oh man, I bet we're here. So we went back and started checking the emails. We have confirmed over 30 that we've helped get into different Grand Lodges. Confirmed.
That's great.
In the United States alone, whoever's listening, grab onto your seats. There are over 750 bogus Grand Lodges. Fake. 45 in Houston alone. It's just fascinating to me, the scale of this. And so many of these men are taken advantage of.
That's the most unfortunate thing, is that to people who are outside the craft, they don't understand that there's no copyright on the square and compasses. Anybody can slap it on anything. A lot of these organizations, the thing that establishes them is they'll put this stuff on their website and say, well, here's all of our documents. And they're very clearly forged in some cases.
You can get a Wix website, throw a website up, throw you some social media, get you some Etsy charters, and boom, you got a Grand Lodge.
Which seems like who would do that? But it is being done all the time.
It's just fascinating.
Thanks, Brian, and the whole crew at the Old Fashion Masonic Podcast. And I've got a whole conversation with Brother Brian, and you can check that out in the links below when you're done watching this video. But as Brian alluded to in our chat, many of the men involved in clandestine masonry, they're victims. They are not villains. They wanted to be real Freemasons. They wanted what we had. They wanted brotherhood. They wanted a chance for self-improvement. They wanted a place alongside other good men in their community. But they were led astray by liars and, frankly, scam artists. So as true Freemasons, what do we do when we encounter someone we suspect may be a member of a clandestine organization? The first thing is we don't talk about Freemasonry with them. And above all, if they invite you to sit in their lodge or they ask to sit in yours, that can't happen. You can't hold Masonic communication or vouch for a man who does not hail from a regular, recognized grand jurisdiction. And that's your primary obligation. It doesn't mean you can't be friendly. It doesn't mean you can't chat with them about the weather. It just means you have to treat them the same way you would treat anyone else who isn't a Mason, because even though they may think they are a Mason, they are not Masons. Second, you want to whisper good counsel. You don't want to berate anyone. You don't want to embarrass anyone. As we said, many of these guys, they don't know that they are clandestine. They went to join a lodge. They found one nearby and they joined. They had no idea about recognition. So if you're in a conversation with this man, ask about his lodge or his Grand Lodge and how it might be connected to the rest of the Masonic community. After that, the conversation will kind of progress in a natural fashion. And Brother Brian has done this on his channel a whole bunch of times. It's a simple internet search on your phone, and you can show him how perhaps his group is not recognized by the rest of the Masonic community. Now, that might be upsetting, but at least you're giving this man the truth, and maybe it will turn into an opportunity for him to be a part of a legitimate Masonic organization in the future. And third, that's what you do. You point them to a legitimate Masonic source. Direct him to the website of the Grand Lodge or the Prince Hall Grand Lodge in your state or province. Let him see for himself what true Freemasonry is. This is why all of us in the Masonic community, for our lodges, our Grand Lodges, our valleys, our chapters, whatever, all of our websites and Facebook pages, Instagram pages, all the socials, all that stuff, all these things always need to be up to date. There are men who have no idea about Freemasonry who decide that they have an interest in it. They go looking for it and they're just going to go to Google. They don't know how to vet good information from bad information. So the only way we can beat bad information is to just pile on good information. So if your lodge website is not up to date, if your Facebook page is all banged up, fix it. And finally, you have to be compassionate with these guys. Realize that this man has been fooled and maybe wasted a bunch of time and money, and that could be kind of hard to accept. But if he wants to become a true Freemason like us, there are legitimate paths forward for him to do so. That process is known as healing. And typically a lodge has to work with the Grand Lodge in their area to make that happen. And it is a little bit complicated and it's different from Grand Lodge to Grand Lodge. So I don't want to advise on that any further than to say, if you run into someone from Clandyland, as Brother Brian says, the best thing you could do would be to steer them to your Grand Lodge representative so that they can begin investigating the process of healing as it relates specifically to your grand jurisdiction. You can guide a man towards the true light of Freemasonry. And if he never gets the chance to become a legitimate Mason, at least you've given him the information to prevent him from being scammed further or from being treated badly by one of these clandestine organizations that are out there right now preying on men all over. And if you don't believe me, there is a website. Philaxis Society does a great website. I've got the address here on screen, and it's also in the description below. And this has a list of bogus Masonic organizations all over the United States and around the world. By understanding the difference between true clandestine Freemasonry and irregular Freemasonry and unrecognized Freemasonry, we know how to respond to people with both caution and charity. We can protect our integrity, the integrity of our lodges and grand lodges, and the integrity of the craft for future generations. And we might be able to save someone from being scammed by one of these bogus organizations.